MI5, you would do you seriously think that if MI6 and MI5 told the Prime Minister this is a really serious risk to national security, the Prime Minister would just override that advice?
Well, let me reframe it. What's the big value of giving a huge chunk of real estate to our biggest geopolitical adversary in the middle of London?
In today's clip, Patrick Christys breaks down a disturbing development involving Keir Starmer and a proposed Chinese mega embassy in London. This isn't just another building. We're talking about a heavily secured complex, reportedly featuring underground facilities, positioned directly above some of the UK's most sensitive data infrastructure. So the big question is this: is the Prime Minister brushing aside serious national security concerns to stay on Beijing's good side? Stick around until the final moments, because the panel doesn't hold back, even going as far as to label the move as borderline treason. Let's go through the footage together, and once it's done, I'll give you my honest take.
Does Comrade Keir work for Beijing or Britain? Today, secret plans for a new Chinese super embassy in London were revealed. These include a 208-room underground bunker complex and a hidden chamber, which will sit alongside fibre-optic cables, transmitting data between the City of London and Canary Wharf. The hidden room also contains hot air extraction systems, which could suggest the installation of heat-generating equipment like advanced computers able to be used for espionage. To be clear, this could give China access to all the communications to Britain's financial districts, as well of millions of people's personal emails. Could the Chinese also use these underground bunkers to detain and torture people? Once it's built, the Chinese embassy will have diplomatic immunity, meaning nobody is ever allowed to go in and inspect it. And the breaking news on the front page of the Daily Telegraph tonight. The White House is deeply concerned by Labour's plan to approve the embassy. A senior Trump administration official raised fears that China could exploit the UK's critical infrastructure. Clearly, there is no way that this should ever be allowed to go ahead. So why is Sir Keir Starmer set to approve plans ahead of his visit to China next month? Now, although he insisted that it was the Crown Prosecution Service's fault, Starmer is accused of deliberately collapsing the Chinese spy case last year. His government apparently failed to hand over evidence that could have led to a prosecution. Why? He's giving away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius and making the British taxpayer pay for it. The big winners here? China. In fact, a Chinese judge was one of those who ruled against Britain. Starmer's friend was also the lawyer for Mauritius. Why is he allowing that to happen? The Prime Minister recently claimed he hadn't made his mind up about the Chinese super embassy. So why did he raise it personally with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in 2024? Now, watch very closely here about what happens to the British press as Starmer starts talking to the Chinese leader about this embassy.
You raised the Chinese embassy building in London when we spoke on the telephone, and we have since taken action by calling in.
They're ushered out. Why? So, they don't care about you, do they? They don't want to front up to it. Sir Keir Starmer is such a weak man that he seems willing to compromise our national security, our national interests, the City of London, our personal emails and communications and human rights, just so he can lick Beijing's boots. We are led by a Beijing bootlicker. Let's get the thoughts of my panel. We've got GB News contributors Will Kingston and Connie Shaw. We're also joined by political commentator and journalist Jonathan Liss. So, Will, is Starmer working for Britain or Beijing?
It's a good question. The short answer is I don't know who Starmer is working for. I don't even think he really knows, to be honest. Look, part of me just says that this is the sort of farcical incompetence we've come to expect from this Labor government. But part of me actually says that it is scarier than that, and that is that this country, and this government particularly, has its head in the sand over the threat of China. We keep talking about the awful, evil Russian threat, when really the greatest geopolitical threat to this country is China. Play this out, Patrick. There is every chance that there will be some sort of conflict over the Taiwan Strait in 2027 or 2028. If that happens, then the US is more likely than not going to intervene in some way, which means the UK will be forced to intervene in some way. What happens happens when you have this huge super embassy right in the heart of London with a country that we are at war with and we are still economically dependent on. Not as much as we were, but still economically dependent on. We need to wake up to this threat and recognise that China is an awful dictatorial regime that we may very well be at war with, and in order to do that, we need to start making difficult choices and stop this sort of silly nonsense that apparently we're just happy to continue going along with.
I can't see a single logical reason why Sir Keir Starmer would allow the Chinese to have it's the largest embassy in Europe and have it conveniently right over the most sensitive fibre optic cables probably in the country.
Well, the only possible explanation could be trade. I mean, I know you just shown there that our trade has not gone really well, but there is this trade deal on the table that Starmer is desperate to be getting with China. I mean, from what I understand, the Chinese had applied for an embassy and it originally got rejected, and then they said, we're not going to apply for an embassy until we know that it's definitely going to get through. And then as soon as Labour got into power, they applied again. And Starmer spoke to Xi Jinping about it, as we saw in that clip. I mean, to the public, this is going to look completely treacherous, because how can it, on one hand, Starmer continuously say, and the government continuously say, that nothing is at risk, that there isn't going to be anywhere near sensitive cables, yet this huge expose by the Telegraph, and it feels like journalists over and over again saving us from our own leaders, exposing this, how serious and sensitive those cables really are, and the fact that the Chinese wouldn't tell the government the plans. They were redacting plans to the government, and now we've seen it. The government can't lie anymore, but now they're still telling the US that there's nothing to be worried about. I mean, how can Keir Starmer come off as anything other than treacherous to the public?
Well, he's just a Beijing bootlicker, isn't he?
You like that term, don't you?
I don't know whose boots he licks, Patrick, if any. What I would say...
But it looks a lot like Xi
Well,
Jinping.
look, what I would say, in all seriousness, is that one thing you can say about Starmer, and my goodness, there are many, many things you can criticise about that man, but he has never struck me as a person who would be cavalier with Britain's national security. That is something that he seems to take. That is something that the Chagos has nothing to do with national. Chagos is not compromising Britain's national security.
But sorry, it will do in 99 years' time, mate.
Look, I don't think that it's inconceivable that if MI6 and MI5 advised against this, the Prime Minister would go against that advice. So I'm not a security expert. I haven't seen classified advice, obviously. What I should hope is that security experts who have been in a position to advise Downing Street on this have given their advice, and I am inclined to follow it. I agree with you. It raises eyebrows. From a layman's perspective, this looks like a suspect move. And if I was just looking at the evidences in the public domain, I would say let's not give China this embassy. But again, I defer to MI6 and MI5, who I'm sure will have a better sense of this than I do.
This is. Oh no! Just to be clear about what MI5 and MI6 did say on this, they've been quite clever with their wording. So publicly, what they've said is that they've not raised any public concerns, right? Which implies to me that obviously behind the scenes there's something else going on. I mean, it would be pretty bad for MI5 and MI6 to publicly come out and talk about this. They have previously come out there when the Chinese spy scandal was collapsing around us. They did come out and do a statement about how dangerous they thought China was. So we can read between the lines here about what MI5 and MI6 think about it behind the scenes. But for Sir Keir Starmer to do this, I mean, it kind of use the word treacherous. I mean, for me, it's borderline treasonous.
Yeah, it is. And again, the problem is that with this government, there always seems to be another party or stakeholder group that takes precedence over the British people. You saw it with the Chagos deal. You see it whenever international human rights is mentioned as a way to just keep allowing people to come into the country. It is always as if that it is put last. Now, in this instance, I think that there is just this cavalier attitude to the Britain's national security, which again, you see flow through each of those examples I just gave.
Yeah.
And it's it may not be treason, but it just goes to show that they don't take national security seriously. If they're letting this stuff happen, how can you say that they are on the ball with this? They're obviously
first of all,
not.
they haven't actually given the go-ahead yet. And, I would just say exactly what I said a moment ago, that MI6 and MI5 do you seriously think that if MI6 and MI5 told the Prime Minister this is a really serious risk to national security, the Prime Minister would just override that advice?
Well, let me
Do you really
reframe it.
think-
What's the big value of giving a huge chunk of real estate to our biggest
That's not
geopolitical
what I asked.
adversary in the middle of London?
So look, I agree with you in the sense that it looks suspicious on the outside. But if MI6 and MI5 are giving this advice, then it just seems wildly implausible the Prime Minister would contradict it. Can I also just say for a second about the point you made a second ago? There is almost zero chance that the UK is going to engage China militarily in the next few years. If China invades Taiwan, which is, has been made a lot likelier by recent events, absolutely. The United States is not going to intervene on Taiwan's part.
Very well made.
The United States is no more going to engage China militarily than it will engage Russia.
Let's not retract too much here on that, because, Connie, I want to put this to you. So one of the big revelations that came out around the time of the Chinese spy scandal was that actually we had incomprehensibly, and this was under the Conservatives, allowed a Chinese company to have full access to our computers and things like that in Downing Street, which it turned out they'd then hacked. China was accused of hacking every single diplomatic communication from Britain all around the world. So we know that. Then we've also got various different things that we believe may have come from China, certain things that have happened when the NHS has been hacked, all of that stuff. So we've got a track record here of the way that China operates. Our military are told when they're in, believe it or not, our military sometimes drive around in Chinese-made electric vehicles, and they're putting signs in those for military personnel to say, do not have any conversations in these vehicles because we are worried that the Chinese are listening to it. So it seems absolutely bonkers to me that Keir Starmer would go ahead and say the Chinese can build an embassy with a bunker that is over the fibre optic cable, so every communication for our financial district, and also millions and millions of people's personal emails. It just does not make any sense. Just doesn't.
Well, precisely. I think the point about the MI5 and the MI6 thing, they may well have said, had concerns, they may well have not. But after everything that we've seen so far with this government, it's going to be quite hard for the British people to believe that Keir Starmer wouldn't go against what MI5 will. And I'm not saying that he would, but I think from public perception, this is going to look awful. We obviously just had that story about El Fattah from Egypt. And how could the government have not known about what he said? And they were happy to welcome all of that in, and very quickly was able to say that his comments were atrocious. He will have to turn on this, because if he doesn't have the support of Trump...
No one's talking about what China's
where are the human rights? Where are the human rights concerns here? 1 million Uyghur Muslims in camps, having their organs harvested, women being forcefully sterilised. No one seems to be caring about that. British citizens locked up, potentially tortured by the Chinese.
Yeah, it's a tragic irony that this is actually a genocidal regime, but you don't hear people out on the streets of London campaigning against the Chinese. And it goes to show, A, the hypocrisy of the left when it comes to Israel, but also, secondly, no one seems to care about the moral values of China.
Starmer needs the money from China now, Jonathan, because him and Rachel Reeves have knackered the economy.
What do you think should be Britain's approach to China? Should we say that because China does despicable things in the world, which absolutely seems to be the case, that we should ignore China, which is going to be as powerful a superpower as America in the next 20 or 30 years?
No, it won't.
Yes, it will be. Absolutely. It already has. It has
Pull
its
them
own
out
sphere of
just
influence.
once, maybe.
Absolutely.
Which they've not done.
And I think the government should consistently call out countries that do terrible things, including the United States.
But he can't do it, can he? Because he's a weak man.
They didn't mince their words. The panel openly used the term treason, and when you step back and examine what's being reported, it's not hard to see why. We're talking about alleged underground facilities, specialised systems designed to protect intelligence infrastructure, and journalists reportedly being removed from the room during Starmer's meeting with Xi Jinping. Patrick Christys raised a crucial question. Why would Britain hand over prime territory in the capital to a major strategic competitor, especially when our closest ally, the United States, is openly urging caution? It paints a worrying picture of leadership that seems detached, distracted, or dangerously careless. So what's really going on here? Sheer incompetence or a deliberate betrayal of national interests? Share your take in the comments. And if you want more content like this, tap like, subscribe to the channel, and switch on notifications so you never miss an update.